Hello, everyone. Welcome to Epic Work Items Migration Sync. It's 16th of November, and first item for discussion is work streams. So, Donald, you want to take over?
Yep, thanks, Kushal. So last week we talked about the work streams and assigning DRIs to each of those three work streams. Thank you, Eugenia, Felipe, and Alexandru for volunteering to be DRIs for the three work streams. Those are listed in the update issue also, and I figured we'd use the same update issue for updates on those three work streams. We could probably start that next week if you are all right with that. And then I did have a question regarding the work streams. I was wondering if we could talk about how we envision. There was a note last week, and I don't know if we really discussed it, but around working on the three work streams in parallel. I was talking with Alexandru, and he did mention it in the comment that I linked there, that it seems that work streams 2 and 3 need to be, it can't be worked on until we at least figure out what the data structure is going to look like from work stream 1. But Jan, you here? Yeah, you are. Okay. Looks like you had a comment on that.
Yeah, I agree that we can delay the backfilling phase a little bit if needed. But I'm curious, what are DRI's thoughts about synchronization of these phases, because I imagine that work in each of the stream would be basically broken to smaller bits, like implementing one widget. Yeah, so when we implement parity between, for example, related epics and related items, we are able to also implement syncing of this. And I would hope that we can also implement backfilling of this logic into the migration. I would expect that the migration wouldn't run after each iterative step, but we could have it prepared. So it was just a thought. So I'm curious what others think about how this work should be synchronized, so we don't have to wait for finishing wall stream 1 and then start working on stream 2, and then when it's done, then start working on stream 3. Virginia, you have a comment there?
Yes, I agree that nothing is stopping us from going to implementing, or at least making the step for the syncing process, because most of the work stream 1 is complete. So I created an issue to track everything, because it's a lot of issues in Epic. So I mostly trying to see if we're missing anything and what's blocking, because a lot of the things that we're missing, they're not actually blocking at this stage. So I think we have a couple of things blocking, but we can start on the syncing steps, and then we can coordinate. Once we run out of things to sync, the others are probably finished already. So I think the next step would be figure out how to sync the widgets that are already there.
Yeah, I think it makes sense. Also, I think for syncing, I think you mentioned that we could start with basic things like title, description. I think confidential is also a simple thing. Maybe milestone ID. Yeah, and while things go on, we start syncing other more complex properties.
Do you think it makes sense to use the same approach also for backfilling, or maybe it's better to check with Alexandru. So yeah, the question is whether it makes sense to start preparing this migration now, or just wait further with the migration.
Maybe I have a suggestion about the backfilling. I'm not sure if it's worth it, but maybe instead of doing one single time big background migration, we could start using workers and do some kind of ongoing sync at ongoing basis. But maybe it's worth to do that. And if we go with this approach, we could consider maybe workstream 3 as unblocked.
Yeah, I guess that might be an option too, and I assume that I'm not sure to what comment you are referring to, but the worker would just schedule backfilling data for missing work item epic when some legacy epic is updated or created. Is that the case?
Yeah, it just checks, for example, I think we will have some kind of field on an epic, which means it's like we add a work item ID field to each epic, so it belongs to the work item. And then the worker is scheduled, it was, I don't know, daily or every week to check epics that don't have that field, so it doesn't belong to a work item yet, and creates one. So maybe that can be done in parallel. I'm not sure if it's worth it, but maybe it's one case we could study.
Yeah, I don't know. The only concern would be that suddenly we would have all epics synced, which might be too soon. But yeah, I don't have strong opinion about this. If it makes sense, then why not?
Okay, so I think we can probably get into more detailed conversations around the implementation of each of the work streams, or primarily work stream 2 and 3. But it does sound like we do have a path to work in parallel, as long as we're coordinating. So the DRIs primarily will just focus on collaborating with each other, and the teams that are doing each of the work streams will also work on just collaborating with the other and coordinating with the other work stream teams. Cool. Okay. Let's move on to B. Did we make a decision on, what was it that I went to? Oh, the if we're going to handle essentially if we're going to handle the logic on the front end or the back end around displaying either new displaying things through the work items API or displaying things through the legacy epics API. Jan, you got a comment on that one?
Yeah. So if we plan to keep around all the APIs related to epics, I agree with you that maybe we don't need to migrate front end to work items epics right now, but in future it might be a problem if some new requirement pops up that we need to add some new feature, and we would be forced to keep updating the old legacy epic because the front end would keep using it. So we would need to keep using the old legacy API or adding new features to the legacy API. And yeah, also it's not clear to me if we really want to keep all the legacy APIs or not. I understand that we won't, but I'm not sure if it was confirmed. I mean, should customers still be able to keep maintaining Epic boards with existing IDs, Epic IDs in future once the migration is done through the legacy Epic board API? If yes, we should probably maintain these legacy APIs basically for the whole v4 lifecycle as it was requested for Epic API. I mean, there are some additional APIs, not only the Epic API, which this requirement might apply to. I think it will be, Amanda, mostly the product question, what we expect to provide to customers.
Yeah, unless Melissa feels differently, I think that the legacy API needs to be supported, not necessarily for the boards themselves, but for customers who are using the REST API today. Does that answer the question?
Just to double check, I understood. We should keep supporting the main legacy Epic API, but not necessarily the additional API endpoints for managing other resources like Epic boards or Epic links, API endpoints and stuff like this. Is that correct?
Yeah, if somebody's actually using those, I think that that's less abrasion for them to make a change. Whereas like the main REST API, Epic's endpoint is a much bigger, harder thing to migrate for them. So the main Epic's API should be supported. And we should have a solution for that in the future. But the Epic's API endpoint that's driving boards, I think is okay to migrate.
Cool. Thanks.
And
for-
roadmaps.
Just one comment on that. Could we look at usage just to see if that's correct, like that the boards API is not being used? Because Amanda, one thing that comes to mind is like, remember there was like a third-party integration that was looking at boards for whatever reason. I think it was for like stack ranking or something. So I think I agree with you, Amanda. I would just like to double check usage to make sure like that is actually what's happening.
Should we do the same for roadmaps?
Yeah, like for any of the API endpoints that we have, just confirming if there's a lot of external usage or if it's just mostly ourselves.
Okay. Okay. And how do I get that information? Does anybody know?
I'm not sure if this is accessible in Sisense, but we can get statistics about accessing our API endpoints through the Kibana logs.
Okay.
But it's only for 1 week, last 7 days available.
Okay.
We can look for if it's GraphQL API that our frontend is using the operation name parameter. It's mandatory for the frontend, but we can look for operations without operation name. And those are definitely from external customers. I mean, they can also use operation names. It's not 100% guarantee, but most of them don't. So we can start looking at the requests made without operation name. Again, not sure if we host a long list of those requests, but we can try search for them.
Yeah, I think a week is more than enough to get just the general feel, right? Like it doesn't need to be complete. It's just like general idea would be enough to make a decision.
I think that even if we remove this, it will be the breaking change, API breaking change. So I guess we will need to prepare a plan for removal this after the migration as part of some major release, I guess. So we will probably need to maintain the legacy APIs for this secondary endpoints like Epic boards for a while after the migration still.
What about within, so for like the issue API that returns, like we return Epic information there, right? And if we do we have to continue supporting it there, or is the plan to deprecate epics and instead use the I don't know, how would it be? Would we want to pull in the hierarchy widget into the issue API to get parent information, or yeah, do we have a plan around that?
So I think we already have a couple of customers asking for an API to provide list of tasks for an issue. That API is currently not available in REST, at least. I think even in GraphQL it is not available, if I'm not wrong. So we would certainly need to expose that information for a hierarchy widget so that it can be available both for issues as well as epics.
Okay.
But yeah,
Because
given that, yeah, sorry, go
go
ahead.
ahead, sorry. No, you go.
Yeah, so given that we don't already have a REST endpoint available, which provides list of child tasks for an issue, that would be a new feature, which means that we would have to implement it on work items, and that's a bigger task. So that can wait. Only thing that we need to focus on right now is all the existing endpoints, especially the endpoints which have higher usage. And related to that, I think based on our conversation on Slack last week, Issues API can serve Epic work items available at a group level, right? With some tweaks. Like we can technically make those GraphQL queries and mutations work for any work item type, given that they all share the same table. Is that correct?
So can you repeat that? I mean, even if they're at the group level, go ahead, sorry.
Yeah, so we have issues field available on a group level, right? So for instance, if I want to use issues connection, but I somehow unrestrict the type checks that are present in the backend, I can technically fetch list of epics which are available at a group level via group issues API, right? And that should still allow us to prepare the listing page to make use of work items as a way to serve that data without having to update any work item related endpoints. Because if that is possible, then it will unblock a bunch of things. Like one of the first thing that it would unblock is we won't have to rewrite the listing page and add the support for bulk editing or everything. It would all be supported via existing endpoints, both REST and GraphQL, because all the work items are part of issues table.
Yep, that's correct. They all
Yep.
live in the same table.
Yeah, because in that case, it would help us accelerate quite a few things. And on the product planning side, only thing that we would need to worry about are all the roadmap related queries, because those are like brand new queries which are built on top of Epic's table. So those queries would need updating to use the correct table down the line. But I think even Epic boards should work out of the box, minus the swim lanes part.
Yeah,
So
that's
the epics will be available, but only after the backfilling, so only after the last step, right? So we cannot do the syncing of the boards or whatever you're kind of saying until the backfilling.
Yeah, but at least we won't have to update those endpoints or queries after backfilling, right?
Yeah, I guess. I mean, yeah, it depends. I think there will be some internal work to be done, because what you're saying is fetching the work items and then translating that into some sort of a wrapper
Yeah.
that the legacy, the original front end understands in a way.
And I think we would need to do something like that for what you were saying, Donald, like issues API has an epic field. So at some point when we, I don't know, turn on the flag or something, remember, there's the no turning back point when we start using the issues table. I'm not sure if we're going to make users choose or what, but at some point they're going to be using the backfield information, and the legacy epics will stop being changed and everything. At that point, we will have to, I mean, we cannot remove the epics field from issues, for example. So at some point behind the feature flag or something, we're going to have to expose this epic information using the new work items epics that have been backfilled, and expose them exactly like they used to be exposed in the issues API, right? Through the epics field, until we can create a new interface to fetch, I don't know, parent in the issues API, or hopefully we don't have to do this in the issues API, and then deprecate the epics field, something like that. But we're definitely going to have to support epics in the issues API through some kind of, as Alexandru said, wrapper or something that can expose the same information until we can deprecate and remove that field.
I might got lost in the discussion, but my understanding is that we will need to keep the legacy Epic API endpoints at least for some time after the migration. And if we have these legacy endpoints, we can do the migration of frontend to the work items API independently. Only downside is that any extensions we would do would need to be done in legacy API. But even if we would consider switching this to the issues API, as was suggested, it wouldn't solve this problem because we would need to do additional hacks in this wrapper, which would be pasted equally as doing updates in the legacy API. So the only way forward would be to do these extensions on the new work items Epic API once the frontend is migrated to the new API.
Yeah, I feel like we're jumping a bit too far ahead. It's like there's so many unknowns. Like we are at the point where we need to start working on syncing data, and then I guess we should just pick something to sync, to make this work with the sync data or whatever. It's either the lists at the group level or the boards. We pick one, we do, and we find the unknowns that way, because like right now I feel it's kind of difficult for us to catch everything. Do you all agree, or is it like it may be only me not being on part here with everyone else? Because again, I've been a bit away from what's going on, but yeah.
Okay, I
Well,
think we
as
can be
someone
clear
who
on a
just
couple.
joined,
Sorry, go ahead.
I agree with you. Sorry. Yeah, as I was just saying, as someone who just joined, I agree with you. It seems like we are planning a step longer than our legs. Maybe we should give smaller steps to really plan. Because like when you say, oh, we can just do some tweaks on the issue API, depending on the size of these tweaks, it's a lot of work. So I don't think we have enough information now to say that, you know.
Like let's set a milestone of like, let's have everything that we have mapped already, like the parity, the feature that have parity, have it synced into the work items for the epics or whatnot, right? So like let's get to that point where everything that's in epics is in the work items as well. Like we're creating the work item, we're updating it, we're doing that. So at least work towards that. I'm not sure what's the progress on that, or if we have any of that just yet. But like once we have that, we can then say, okay, well, let's now pick one UI feature where we can use that data or I don't know, create the wrapper, or I don't know what we exactly we need to do to integrate that.
Yeah.
Yeah, but I do feel like we can make some assumptions already by testing out current work items in some of these views. Because when we do the sync, ideally, we're going to have all the data that's currently in legacy epics within work items. So if we can get ahead of some of that stuff, we probably want to now. Like if we can figure out a way to get boards to work with work items, that answers the question on how to convert epic boards. If we can figure out how to get work items to work with roadmaps, or sorry, to get the roadmap view with work items, that it solves then it answers the question around what we can show on roadmaps.
Right, but that's not then that's then not related at all to the epics migration as it is. It's really a totally different stream work, because like you can go ahead now and tie in whatever work items we already have into the UI. Like that should not block or should not be dependent sort of in any way on the epics migration itself, right? Because like you'll still consume work items as they are.
Well, so that's the question then. We want to figure out the effort of doing that. So converting those views to use work items versus converting or having a layer to not have to change anything on those views, but still use work item data.
Yeah, that's I think it's twofold in a way. Like you probably don't want to change the URLs and how the user interacts with the boards, but then anything beyond that we can change. If it's, I don't know what we need to change. Again, I'm lacking a bit on the front end, but if you're going to work directly with work items, I would assume that the data structure is greatly different from Epic's data structure. So like yeah, that's where the question then is, do we add that wrapper, or can we I don't see how we can translate. I don't know, maybe there is a way to translate the URL itself into now to work with both the old API and the new API. Do you know what I mean? It's like you are accessing the boards with whatever it has the params, and then I don't know on which switch you kind of say, okay, now let's translate that to the work items thing, fetching the work items data. But that still doesn't reuse the front end, because you'll need to translate, if you're fetching the work items data, you need to translate it back into something that the front end understands in terms of data structure.
Yeah, Kushal, do you have a feel for an level of effort on migrating the boards to use work items?
That is the way boards can understand work item data structure, right? Like all the components being able to handle work items. I think it would be moderate, but Natalia can provide more insight because she has reviewed a ton of refactored MRs. So.
The main problem there will be not to consume the separate work item. Converting work item, like epic structure, work item structure is not a big deal. We're trying to do this on the drawer for issue list. The main problem that we will need work item lists. Currently we have epic lists and issue lists to fetch. And this will need to be an additional work on the backend to form this work item list so we can consume them on the boards.
So then we can delay a little bit the lists and start one with the boards. Does that sound like what we'd want to try as a first thing? if there is like it sounds like there is some sort of a compatibility between the two things, then we can do the migration of epics into work items and try the boards first, see how that works out, and then continue on to work on the lists.
So I think boards is definitely more complex compared to listing as far as like making it compatible with work items is concerned. But if we and again, I'm trying not to think way too ahead in the future, but we are trying to basically move towards saved views where our API source remains intact. Just that boards is just one of the ways to visualize the same data. So users should be able to switch between a plain list versus board versus roadmap down the line. So if we were to say, for example, focus on boards for now and worry about listing later, I just want to make sure that if backend is spending time creating those mutations for reordering items within the list as well as creating the listing queries, we should at least be mindful about how those queries will help us achieving the grand view of having a listing part of that same page where it allows us to work with visualizations in different ways. That is the only concern that I would have. Otherwise, yeah, focusing on boards would be ideal compared to listing.
Regarding the boards, why are we actually trying to update Epic boards to talk to the new work items API instead of rather reusing the issue boards front end to talk to work items API? Because the long-term goal is to use issue boards for work items, right? So do we actually need to do any updates to Epic boards at all?
No, I think the plan is to get rid of Epic boards and just have a single board.
Yeah, just boards that shows everything together. Yeah.
So yeah, the question is in transition, right? A lot of customers will have bookmarked Epic boards. So like you don't want to really break those. You want some sort of a smooth transition from you clicking on the old bookmark, but then you need some sort of a redirect, if you will, to the issue board. I think that will work, and like at least it's seamless to the customer, and you're showing the same data. That should work. But I think that's where the problem comes in. It's not the problem of displaying epics on the issues boards, but how do we transition seamlessly for the customer without having them to recreate the boards and re-link the bookmarks and all that stuff. At least that was my understanding.
Yeah, so that stuff will probably be handled in the backfill, right? Like everything that Epic Boards uses should be available within the work items API.
The backfilling will migrate the data, but the URL, the old API, the Epic's boards API, does not translate directly into the issues API. I don't know. I don't think it's one-to-one, but I'm not sure.
Yeah, it might not be, but I think feature-wise, it's Epic boards and issue boards are essentially the same. So we can just turn on issue boards with the Epic work item type.
Right. So is it okay to break the bookmarks, basically all bookmarks for the customer, and say, yeah, you can find the same board, even maybe the same name of the board, but you need to navigate now to the issues, or like you need to go back to your board and just pick it up, right? Because I guess the URL will be different, or something will be different there. Like the old bookmarks will not exactly work as like you'll just click it and it will work in that case. You know what I mean?
Will the saved work? The ones that are physically saved on the board, in the board.
Yeah, I guess you can still have the saved ones. the saved boards because we can translate the parameters into the issues boards, but the
URL.
the URL might not work because of the different. I don't know if we'll be able to make the transition of the URL into the new one, or if that's needed at all.
To be honest, I don't know, or I think that migration of Epic boards to issue boards is a bit out of scope of this Epic migration effort. Would it make sense to rather just keep Epic boards around after the migration of Epics for one big major milestone during which customers are expected to rebuild or recreate their boards as issue boards and then just discard these Epic boards with legacy API? Just Epic boards. I mean, keep legacy API, but Epic boards.
Yeah, I agree with that, Jan. And I feel the same about the Epic list, right? Like, yes, we want to combine them at some point, right? And we want to have this more unified experience, but it would be good to minimize the amount of change, right, in Epic's migration, because the more we add to like consolidation, it's more work and more risk and more change for end users. We think it's good change, right? But some people may not, and there's going to be a lot of change with like the drawer and the new fields and etc. So I think as much as we can keep those other peripheral things the same and just focus on the data moving over and like displaying in the new work items detail page, that would be ideal from my perspective. I don't know,
Yeah,
Amanda, what you think.
There's just a there's going to be this weird transition time. Like if we go with that and a customer has the Epic work item detail view available, if they make a change to that, or if they create a Epic work item, they will not see those changes in the legacy Epic board, right? Yeah.
During the migration period, I think that for this reason, the proposal from John was that we would not allow users to mix legacy epics and new work item epics during this migration. So user could opt in to use the work item epics, but not unless he uses the legacy epics. So it would be one or the other one during the migration. Once the migration is finished, basically we would allow this, but we
But
wouldn't
if we allow editing the work item epic and the UI is still on the legacy, they will not see that information that is updated. And more
So
like it's just because it's the unidirectional sync, you cannot update the work item epic until you completely moved on to display from that.
yeah, so that's why the proposal was that we would figure out a way to basically rewire, or at least one of the proposals, rewire the APIs that feed these legacy views to now be pointed at work items, right? So that we wouldn't have to change the views and we would just sort of change it behind the scenes so that we wouldn't have a break and change at the API layer. That's what we talked about in the last meeting.
Yeah, so I think bare minimum what we can focus as far as migration is concerned is that keep existing views intact without adding a ton of new features right away. But just make sure that we have a headroom available down the line and we don't have to rewrite everything that we are adding around this time after the migration is complete. And we can then discuss individual items, especially the specifics of when to begin backfilling versus which query to update first rather than reusing the issues part in the individual issues, if it makes sense. So, Donald, we have everything for the work stream identification, or I think the everything around parallelization is still, I think, up for discussion, I guess. I mean, we have gotten some things ironed out in this call, but I believe we would still need to discuss it further, perhaps in a call or async, right?
Yeah, just one quick question for PMs as we are on call. Just wanted to double check. What do you expect to see through Legacy Epics API when migration is finished? Do you expect that customers see all the epics, also newly created work item epics, or should we show just all previously created legacy epics? I would expect that customers should be still see the all work item epics, even if they create new work item epics later after the migration, right?
Yes, that's what I would expect
Okay.
as well. Because
Yeah.
if you think of people who build integrations, things on top of GitLab where you expect to see certain data, they would expect to continue to see data until those endpoints are deprecated.
Cool. Thanks for confirmation. I think there will be a problem with the bidirectional sync because when we are done with this migration, we will still need to be able to actually create legacy epic records for also new records, or figure out other way around how to actually show all work item epics together as a list, because these are identified with internal ID and it's scoped to the namespace. So we cannot mix in the list. We cannot use in legacy API just legacy epics and new work item epics. So we will need to figure out some way around.
Okay, and for any discussion that we want to continue, we can use the weekly update epic, which has all the work stream specific threads. So we can take that conversation there as well and have as much async discussions as possible so that any major questions can be left for these weekly meetings to continue. Because I see that all of us are frequently going overtime the meeting, and let's try to stick to the schedule so that other meetings are not disrupted. But yeah, thanks a lot everyone for all the inputs, and have a good rest of your week.